Rachel wiped the sweat from her forehead as she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment. Her feet ached from standing all day at the hospital where she worked as a nurse's aide. The double shift had been brutal, but she needed every penny. Being a single mom to 2 kids wasn't easy, especially when the bills seemed to multiply faster than her paychecks. "Mommy," 7-year-old Sophie called out as Rachel opened the door. Her daughter was sitting at the kitchen table, helping her little brother Tommy with his coloring book. The babysitter, Mrs. Garcia from downstairs, smiled warmly from the couch. "They were angels today," Mrs. Garcia said, gathering her things. Rachel handed her the cash she'd set aside, mentally calculating what was left for groceries this week. It wasn't much. After Mrs. Garcia left, Rachel collapsed onto the couch. Sophie climbed up beside her, snuggling close. "Mommy, you look tired." "Just a long day, sweetheart," Rachel said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "But seeing you two makes everything better." Tommy ran over with his coloring page, a crooked house with a smiling sun. "Look what I made." "It's beautiful, buddy," Rachel said, her heart swelling despite her exhaustion. These moments made all the struggle worthwhile. She might not have much, but she had them, and they had each other. The next morning, Rachel was rushing to get the kids ready for school when she heard a commotion in the hallway. Through the peephole, she saw her elderly neighbor from across the hall, Mr. Harold Chen, struggling with 2 heavy grocery bags. He was an older gentleman, probably in his 80s, and he lived alone. Rachel had seen him around but never really talked to him much. Everyone was always too busy, too wrapped up in their own problems. But watching him now, his hands shaking as he tried to get his keys out while balancing the bags, something tugged at her heart. She opened her door. "Mr. Chen, let me help you with those," she said, hurrying over. The old man looked up, surprised. His face was weathered with deep lines, but his eyes were kind. "Oh, no need to trouble yourself, young lady. I can manage." "It's no trouble at all," Rachel insisted, taking both bags from him. They were heavier than she expected. How had he carried them up 3 flights of stairs? Sophie and Tommy peeked out from their apartment, curious. "Can we help too, Mommy?" Sophie asked. "Sure, honey." "Can you hold the door open for Mr. Chen?" Sophie beamed, clearly proud to be given an important job. Tommy stood beside her, trying to look just as helpful. Mr. Chen's apartment was neat but sparse. There were a few photos on the wall, mostly black and white, showing a younger version of him with a beautiful woman Rachel assumed was his late wife. The place had that particular kind of silence that comes from living alone for too long. "Thank you so much," Mr. Chen said, as Rachel set the bags on his kitchen counter. "You didn't have to do that." "We're neighbors," Rachel said simply. "Neighbors help each other." "Mommy always says we should be kind," Sophie added, making Mr. Chen smile. "Your mommy is very wise," he said, reaching into a bowl on the counter. "Would you children like a candy?" Sophie and Tommy looked at their mother hopefully. Rachel nodded, and the kids each took a wrapped butterscotch. "What do you say?" "Thank you, Mr. Chen," they chorused. As they left, Rachel noticed Mr. Chen watching them go with a wistful expression. It made her wonder when was the last time someone had visited him, really visited him. The following week, Rachel saw Mr. Chen struggling with groceries again. This time she was prepared. "Mr. Chen, what day do you usually shop? The kids and I can help you bring things up." "Every Thursday," he said, looking touched. "But I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Rachel assured him. "Honestly, it teaches the kids something important. Plus, it only takes a few minutes." And so it became their Thursday routine. Rachel and the kids would wait for Mr. Chen to return from the store, then help him carry everything upstairs. Sometimes Tommy would chatter about his day at kindergarten, and Sophie would show Mr. Chen her latest drawings. The old man seemed to come alive around the children, his face lighting up in ways Rachel hadn't seen before. One Thursday evening, as they were putting away his groceries, Mr. Chen pulled out a container of homemade cookies. "My late wife's recipe," he explained. "I baked them yesterday. Please take some home." Rachel started to protest, but the hopeful look in his eyes stopped her. "Thank you, Mr. Chen, that's very sweet of you." The cookies were delicious, buttery, and perfectly sweet. Sophie and Tommy devoured them while doing homework, declaring them the best cookies ever. It made Rachel think about how little gestures could mean so much. She was just helping an old man with his groceries, but clearly, it meant the world to him. She didn't know it then, but that simple act of kindness was planting seeds for something that would change all their lives. Sometimes the smallest gestures ripple out in ways we never expect. Rachel was just trying to teach her kids to be good people, to help others even when life was hard. She wasn't looking for anything in return. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, Rachel sat at her kitchen table paying bills. The numbers didn't add up the way she needed them to. Rent was due in 2 weeks and she was short. Again, she'd have to pick up extra shifts, which meant less time with Sophie and Tommy. The thought made her chest tighten. But then she remembered Mr. Chen's grateful smile, her children's happy faces as they helped him, and the warmth of those homemade cookies. Maybe they didn't have much money, but they had kindness, and right now that felt like enough. She had no idea that across the hall, Mr. Chen was sitting in his quiet apartment, looking at a photo of his late wife, and thinking about the young mother and her children who had brought light back into his lonely days. The weeks turned into months, and what started as a simple Thursday grocery routine grew into something more. Rachel found herself checking on Mr. Chen more often, not because she felt obligated, but because she genuinely cared. The old man had become part of their lives in a way she hadn't expected. One Saturday afternoon, Rachel was making chicken soup for dinner. She'd bought extra vegetables and chicken on sale, determined to stretch her food budget further. As the soup simmered, filling the apartment with its comforting aroma, Sophie looked up from her coloring book. "Mommy, can we bring some soup to Mr. Chen? He's all alone." Rachel paused, wooden spoon in hand. She'd been thinking the same thing, but worried she might be overstepping. But Sophie was right. The man probably ate frozen dinners or canned food most nights. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart." She ladled soup into a container and the three of them walked across the hall. Mr. Chen answered the door in his cardigan and slippers, surprised to see them on a weekend. "We made extra soup," Rachel explained. "Thought you might like some." The old man's eyes grew misty. "You didn't have to do this." "We wanted to," Tommy piped up.
"It's really good soup."
Mr. Chen invited them in, and as Rachel heated the soup in his kitchen, he showed the children his old photo albums. There were pictures of him as a young man in Taiwan, his immigration to America, his wedding day, and photos of a daughter who looked to be around Rachel's age. "This is my daughter, Jennifer," Mr. Chen said, pointing to a recent photo. "She lives in California. Very busy with her job and her own family." "Does she visit often?" Rachel asked gently. Mr. Chen shook his head. "Once, maybe twice a year. The distance is far and she has her own life." "I understand." But Rachel could hear the loneliness in his voice. She knew that understanding didn't make it hurt less. After that day, bringing Mr. Chen food became another routine. Whenever Rachel cooked something she thought he'd enjoy, she'd make extra. It didn't cost much more, and the joy on his face made it worthwhile. He'd share stories about his late wife, Rose, who had passed away 5 years ago. How she loved to garden, how she'd volunteered at the library, how the apartment had felt empty ever since she left. "You remind me of her," Mr. Chen told Rachel one evening. "Rose always thought of others first, even when things were hard for us." Rachel felt her throat tighten. She didn't feel particularly noble. Most days she felt like she was barely holding it together, running from work to childcare to home, always tired, always worried about money. But maybe that was the point. Maybe kindness mattered most when it was hard. The children loved Mr. Chen too. He never seemed annoyed by Tommy's endless questions or Sophie's need to show him every single drawing she made. He'd tell them stories about growing up in Taiwan, about the engineering projects he'd worked on, about how their generation could do amazing things if they worked hard and stayed curious. "Mr. Chen is like our grandpa," Sophie announced one day. Rachel's own parents had passed away years ago, and the kid's father wasn't in the picture. They didn't have any grandparents, but in a way they'd found one right across the hall. Then came the night that changed everything. It was February, and a nasty flu was going around. Rachel had just gotten home from another double shift, exhausted and looking forward to falling into bed, when she heard a strange sound from the hallway. At first she thought she'd imagined it, but there it was again, a weak, muffled cough. She opened her door and found Mr. Chen collapsed against his apartment door, his key on the floor beside him. His face was flushed and he was shaking. "Mr. Chen!" Rachel rushed to his side, pressing her hand to his forehead. He was burning up with fever. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, barely conscious. Couldn't get the door open. Rachel's nurse training kicked in immediately. Sophie, bring me my phone, quick! Her daughter ran inside and returned with the phone. Rachel called 911, then Mrs. Garcia to come stay with the kids. Within 15 minutes, an ambulance arrived. I'm coming with him, Rachel told the paramedics. She knew Mr. Chen had no one else. At the hospital, Rachel stayed by his side as they ran tests. Pneumonia, the doctor said. Severe, especially dangerous for someone his age. They admitted him immediately, hooking him up to oxygen and IV antibiotics. Rachel sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, watching Mr. Chen sleep fitfully. She should call his daughter, she thought. But when she found Jennifer's number in Mr. Chen's phone and called, it went to voicemail. She left a message explaining the situation. For the next 3 days, Rachel juggled work, the kids, and hospital visits. She'd drop Sophie and Tommy at school, work her shift, pick them up, get them dinner and homework done, then head to the hospital for a few hours while Mrs. Garcia watched them. She was running on fumes and coffee, but she couldn't leave Mr. Chen alone. Jennifer finally called back on the 3rd day, apologetic and worried. I'm so sorry I missed your call. I was in meetings all day. How is he? Stable, Rachel reported. The antibiotics are working. The doctor thinks he'll be okay. Thank God, Jennifer breathed. And thank you for being there. I'll try to fly out next month when things settle down at work. Next month? Rachel thought but didn't say. Your father almost died, but she understood. Life was complicated. People had obligations. She couldn't judge. When Mr. Chen was finally released from the hospital, Rachel took time off work she couldn't afford to lose and brought him home. She made sure his apartment was warm, stocked his fridge with easy meals, and checked on him multiple times a day. You're missing work because of me? Mr. Chen said weakly from his bed. Rachel, you can't afford that. You do the same for me, she said simply, fluffing his pillows. But I'm not your family, he protested. Rachel sat on the edge of his bed and took his weathered hand in hers. Mr. Chen, family isn't just about blood. You've become family to us. Sophie and Tommy ask about you every day. And honestly, you've become important to me too. Tears rolled down the old man's cheeks. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You don't have to deserve kindness, Rachel said softly. That's the whole point. As Mr. Chen recovered over the following weeks, Rachel noticed a change in him. He seemed more thoughtful, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at the kids with such tenderness it made her chest ache. She had no idea that her kindness had sparked something in the old man's mind. That late at night, he was making phone calls to his daughter, having long conversations about gratitude and legacy and doing right by the people who showed up when it mattered. Rachel was just being a good neighbor, a good person. She wasn't keeping score or expecting anything in return. She was just doing what felt right, even though her own life was far from easy. But sometimes the universe has a way of noticing these things. And sometimes when you least expect it, kindness finds its way back to you in the most unexpected ways. March brought warmer weather but colder news for Rachel. She was sitting at her kitchen table staring at the letter from her landlord, reading it for the 3rd time as if the words might change. They didn't. Rent increase. $400 a month, effective next month. $400 might as well have been $4,000. Rachel's hands trembled as she set the letter down. She was already stretched thin, picking up every extra shift she could, buying generic brands, cutting corners everywhere possible. There was no room for an extra $400. Sophie walked into the kitchen, her backpack dragging behind her. Mommy, what's wrong? You look sad. Rachel quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. Nothing, baby. Just grown-up stuff. How was school? But Sophie wasn't fooled. At 7 years old, she was already learning to read her mother's moods, to sense when things weren't okay. It broke Rachel's heart that her daughter had to worry about things like this. That night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel sat with her laptop, searching for cheaper apartments. Everything she found was either too expensive or in neighborhoods she wouldn't feel safe raising her kids. One place was affordable, but the pictures showed peeling paint, broken windows, and reviews mentioned roaches and break-ins. She put her head in her hands. How had it come to this? She worked so hard, did everything right, and still couldn't get ahead. The next blow came 2 weeks later. Tommy had been complaining about his tooth hurting. Rachel had been putting off the dentist, hoping it would get better on its own. But when his face started swelling and he cried through the night, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. The dentist took one look and shook his head. He needs immediate treatment. The tooth is abscessed. We'll need to do a procedure to save it, and he'll need antibiotics. How much? Rachel asked, her stomach sinking. With your insurance, your portion will be about $3,000. $3,000. Rachel felt the room spin.
She didn't have $3,000.
She barely had $300. We can set up a payment plan, the receptionist said kindly, clearly used to this conversation. Rachel signed the papers, agreeing to pay $200 a month on top of everything else. The math was simple and devastating. Even with extra shifts, she couldn't cover the increased rent and the medical payments. Something had to give. The procedure was done that afternoon. Tommy was brave, holding his mother's hand while tears streamed down his little face. Rachel held it together until they got to the car. Then she sat in the parking lot and cried while her son slept in the back seat. Exhausted from pain medication, she started picking up every extra shift the hospital would give her. She worked doubles, came home for a few hours of sleep, then went back. Mrs. Garcia helped with the kids, but even that was costing money Rachel didn't have. She stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. No new clothes, no treats, no extras of any kind. Sophie noticed, of course. "Mommy, why do you leave so early now?" "I miss you." "I know, sweetie," Rachel said, hugging her daughter tight. "I miss you too. But Mommy needs to work right now, okay? It won't be forever. But would it?" Rachel was starting to wonder if this was just her life now. Endless work, endless stress, never quite enough. She tried to hide her struggles from Mr. Chen. He'd been so grateful for her help during his illness, always thanking her, always offering whatever small thing he could. She didn't want to burden him with her problems. He was an old man who'd already been through enough, but Mr. Chen was more observant than she realized. "Rachel, you look exhausted," he said one evening when she stopped by to drop off some dinner she'd made. "Is everything all right?" "Just tired from work," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "You know how it is." He studied her face carefully. "It's more than that." Rachel tried to hold it together, but something about his gentle concern broke through her defenses. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the stress, or just the fact that she'd been holding everything inside for so long. Whatever it was, she suddenly found herself telling him everything. About the rent increase she couldn't afford. About Tommy's dental bills. About the cheaper apartments in dangerous neighborhoods. About working so many hours she barely saw her kids. About feeling like no matter how hard she tried, she was failing. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I shouldn't dump all this on you. You have your own problems." Mr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and squeezed her hand. "Rachel, listen to me. You are not failing. You are one of the strongest people I've ever met." "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel like I'm drowning." "Strong people often do," he said. "But you're still swimming. You're still taking care of your children. You're still working. You're still here. That's not failing. That's fighting." His words brought fresh tears, but these felt different, a little less hopeless. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Rachel said. "I've looked at everything. The numbers just don't work." Mr. Chen nodded slowly. "May I think about this? Perhaps I can help." "Mr. Chen, no," Rachel said quickly. "I wasn't telling you this to ask for help. You've already dealt with so much. I just needed someone to listen. And you listened to me when I needed someone," he said. "When I was sick and alone in that hospital. When my own daughter couldn't be there. You were there, Rachel. You took care of me like family. Maybe it's time someone took care of you." "I can't accept money from you," Rachel said firmly. "That's not why I helped you. I helped you because it was the right thing to do." "I know," Mr. Chen said, his eyes crinkling with a smile. "That's exactly why you deserve help." Rachel left his apartment feeling oddly lighter, even though nothing had actually changed. Just having someone know, someone who cared, somehow made the burden feel less heavy. She didn't know that across the hall, Mr. Chen was already on the phone with his daughter in California. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something important, and I need your help." The next few days were harder than ever. Rachel received a notice that if she didn't sign a new lease at the increased rate within 2 weeks, she'd have to vacate the apartment. She looked at the cheaper options again, her heart sinking at the thought of moving her kids to one of those places. Sophie was struggling at school, her teacher said, having trouble focusing, acting out. Rachel knew it was because of the stress at home because she was gone so much. because even a 7-year-old could sense when her world was unstable. Tommy's tooth was healing, but now he was having nightmares. He'd wake up crying and Rachel would hold him, exhausted but determined to be there for him. One particularly brutal day, Rachel worked a 16-hour shift, came home to find Sophie had failed a math test, and then opened her mailbox to find another bill she couldn't pay. She sat on the floor of her apartment hallway and cried. She didn't even have the energy to make it inside. That's when Mr. Chen's door opened. He walked over slowly, sat down on the floor beside her despite his age, and just put his arm around her shoulders. He didn't say anything. He just sat there with her while she cried. "I don't know how to fix this," Rachel finally said. "You don't have to fix it alone," Mr. Chen said quietly. "Rachel, I've been making some calls. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at him through her tears. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes when we help others, the universe has a way of helping us back," he said. "I got a call today. Someone wants to meet with you." "Who?" "A lawyer," Mr. Chen said. "My lawyer, actually. And my daughter. They're flying in tomorrow. They want to talk to you about something important." Rachel felt confused. "A lawyer? Mr. Chen, I don't understand." He smiled, that warm grandfather smile she'd come to love. "Family takes care of family, Rachel. You taught me that. Now let me show you what it means." Rachel couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions. Why would Mr. Chen's lawyer want to meet with her? What could his daughter possibly have to say? Part of her worried she'd done something wrong, crossed some line she hadn't realized. The meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at a law office downtown. Rachel had to take time off work again, time she definitely couldn't afford. But Mr. Chen had insisted it was important. Mrs. Garcia agreed to watch the kids, asking no questions but giving Rachel a knowing look that suggested she understood something significant was happening. Rachel wore her best outfit, a simple navy dress she'd bought for job interviews years ago. She took the bus downtown, watching the city pass by her window and trying to calm her nerves. The law office was in a tall building with marble floors and expensive-looking furniture. She felt completely out of place. "Rachel," a woman about her age stood up from one of the leather chairs in the waiting area. She had kind eyes and Mr. Chen's smile. "I'm Jennifer, my father's daughter." "It's nice to meet you," Rachel said, shaking her hand. "I've heard so much about you," Jennifer said warmly, "and about your children. My father talks about Sophie and Tommy like they're his own grandchildren." Before Rachel could respond, Mr. Chen appeared from down the hallway, walking carefully but looking better than he had in months. "Rachel, thank you for coming." "Mr. Chen, what's this about?" Rachel asked, unable to hide her anxiety any longer. "Come," he said, gesturing toward a conference room. "Let me explain everything." Inside the conference room, a man in a suit sat at a large table surrounded by papers. He stood when they entered. "Ms. Torres, I'm Richard Mason, Mr. Chen's attorney. Please have a seat." Rachel sat, her heart pounding. Jennifer sat on one side of her, Mr. Chen on the other. The lawyer opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "Ms. Torres," Mr. Mason began, "I understand you've been providing care and assistance to Mr. Chen for several months now. Is that correct?" I just helped him with groceries and checked on him," Rachel stammered. "I didn't do anything special." "My father tells a different story," Jennifer said softly. "He tells me you saved his life, that when he was sick you stayed with him at the hospital, that you've treated him like family when his actual family—" She paused, her voice catching. "When I wasn't there." "I just did what anyone would do," Rachel protested. "But most people don't," Mr. Chen said firmly. "Most people are too busy, too wrapped up in their own lives. You had every reason to be, Rachel. You were working double shifts, raising 2 children alone, struggling to make ends meet. But you still made time for a lonely old man." Rachel felt tears prickling her eyes. "You were never a burden, Mr. Chen. You and the kids, you made each other happy. That was gift enough." Jennifer wiped her own eyes. "My father called me 3 weeks ago. He told me everything you'd done for him, and he told me about your situation, about the rent increase and your son's medical bills." Rachel's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "He shouldn't have told you that. I didn't help him to get anything in return." "We know that," Mr. Chen said. "That's exactly why we want to do this." Mr. Mason slid a document across the table. Rachel looked down at it, trying to make sense of the legal language. She saw her name, saw an address she didn't recognize. Saw the words deed and property transfer. I don't understand, she whispered. Mr. Chen leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. 23 years ago, my wife Rose and I bought a house. A small house in a good neighborhood, about 15 minutes from here. We were going to retire there, maybe have grandchildren visit. But Rose got sick and we never moved. We stayed in our apartment and I've been renting the house to tenants ever since. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. The last tenants moved out 2 months ago. The house has been empty, and Rose and I always talked about what we'd do with it someday. She wanted it to go to someone who really needed it. Someone with a good heart. Rachel's hands started shaking. Mr. Chen, what are you saying? I'm saying the house is yours, he said simply. No rent, no mortgage. Just yours. The room seemed to tilt. Rachel gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible. I can't accept that. It's too much. My father and I talked about this extensively, Jennifer said. We both agree this is what we want to do. What my mother would have wanted too. But houses cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, Rachel said, her voice rising with panic. I can't possibly accept something like that. It's not right. Mr. Chen reached over and took her hand. Rachel, I'm 82 years old. I have more money than I need and more than Jennifer needs. That house has been sitting empty. And every time I think about it, I think about Rose's dream. She always said we should give it to someone who would fill it with love and laughter, someone who would make it a real home. You made my father's last year's worth living, Jennifer added. I live 3,000 miles away. I visit twice a year if I'm lucky. I failed him. You didn't. You didn't fail anyone, Rachel said quickly, but Jennifer shook her head. I did. I got so caught up in my career, my life, that I forgot what mattered. But you, working all those hours, exhausted and struggling, you still had time for kindness. You still had time to care about a lonely old man. That's not something you can put a price on. Mr. Mason cleared his throat. Ms. Torres, I understand this is overwhelming. But let me explain the details. The house is paid off. No mortgage. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in a good school district. Mr. Chen will cover the property taxes for the first 5 years. After that, they'll be your responsibility, but they're quite reasonable. Rachel couldn't speak. She could only stare at the papers, at her name typed in official letters, at the address of a house she'd never seen, but that was apparently now hers. There's one more thing, Mr. Chen said. He nodded to the lawyer who pulled out another document. This is a trust fund, not a large one, but enough to cover your children's college education when the time comes. Jennifer helped me set it up. Stop, Rachel said, her voice breaking. Please stop. This is too much. I helped you because I cared about you, not because I wanted anything. We know, Jennifer said gently, but you need to understand something. My father has been alone and lonely for 5 years. Since my mom died, he's been going through the motions of living. When he got sick, he told me he'd been ready to die. He said he'd made peace with it. She took Rachel's other hand. But then he woke up in that hospital and you were there. You'd stayed all night. You'd called me, taken care of everything, and he realized he didn't want to die. Because for the first time in years, someone actually needed him. Sophie and Tommy needed him. You needed him. He had a purpose again. You gave my father his life back, Jennifer continued, tears streaming down her face. You gave him a reason to keep going. You can't put a price on that, but we can try to give you something that might make your life a little easier. Please let us do this. Rachel looked at Mr. Chen, whose eyes were also wet with tears. You really mean this? I've never meant anything more in my life, he said. You are family, Rachel. You and Sophie and Tommy. And family takes care of family. You taught me that. Rachel thought about Sophie struggling at school because of the stress, about Tommy's nightmares, about the dangerous neighborhood she'd been considering moving to, about the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. And she thought about this kind old man who'd become like a grandfather to her children, who'd shared his stories and his cookies and his wisdom, who'd reminded her that she wasn't alone in the world. Can I see the house? She asked quietly. Mr. Chen smiled, that beautiful warm smile that had become so familiar. I was hoping you'd ask. Jennifer and I would love to show it to you. They drove to the house in Jennifer's rental car. Rachel sat in the back seat, watching familiar streets give way to a neighborhood she'd driven through before but never imagined living in. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, children playing in yards, the kind of place she'd dreamed about but thought was forever out of reach. Jennifer pulled up in front of a modest two-story house with blue siding and white trim. There was a small front porch and a maple tree in the yard. Nothing fancy, but it looked solid and safe and like a real home. "This is it," Mr. Chen said, turning to look at Rachel. "What do you think?" Rachel couldn't speak. She just nodded, trying not to cry again. They walked up the path together. Mr. Chen pulled out a key, old and brass, and unlocked the front door. It swung open to reveal hardwood floors and sunlight streaming through clean windows. The house was empty of furniture but full of potential. "The living room," Jennifer said, gesturing to their right. It was a good size with a fireplace and built-in bookshelves. Rachel could picture Sophie reading there, curled up with her favorite stories. Could picture Tommy building towers with his blocks on that floor. The kitchen was dated but functional, with enough counter space and a window over the sink that looked out onto a small backyard. Rachel walked to that window and saw a swing set, slightly rusty but still sturdy. "The previous tenants left that," Mr. Chen explained. "Their kids outgrew it. I was going to have it removed, but maybe Sophie and Tommy would enjoy it." Rachel pressed her hand to the window, imagining her children playing out there. Safe. Happy. Home. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms. One for Sophie, one for Tommy, and one for Rachel. Each child could have their own space, something they'd never had in the cramped apartment. The bathroom had an old but clean tub. Rachel pictured bath time without the 2 kids fighting over space, without water all over the floor of their tiny apartment bathroom. "The roof is solid," Jennifer said, clearly having researched everything. "The furnace was replaced 3 years ago. The electrical is up to code. It's not perfect, but it's a good house. A safe house." Rachel walked through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood. In the smallest bedroom, the one that would be Tommy's, she stopped and looked out the window. She could see the backyard, the swing set, and beyond that, other houses where other families lived their lives. She thought about the apartment they'd been living in, about the thin walls and the noise and the fear that they'd have to leave, about looking at places with broken windows and bad neighborhoods because that was all she could afford. She thought about every double shift she'd worked, every time she'd come home too exhausted to really be present for her kids, every night she'd lain awake worrying about money, and she thought about Mr. Chen, about helping him with groceries on a Thursday afternoon, because it was the kind thing to do, about how that simple choice had rippled out into something she never could have imagined. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Mr. Chen had followed her into the room. "That's where you're wrong. You deserve this and more. You work harder than anyone I know. You're raising 2 beautiful children alone. You're kind and generous even when you have nothing to spare. If anyone deserves a break, Rachel, it's you." "But I was just being a neighbor," she said, turning to face him. "No," he said firmly. "You were being family. There's a difference. Neighbors wave hello and maybe shovel your walk if it snows. Family sits with you in hospitals. Family checks on you when you're sick. Family makes you feel like you matter." His voice cracked. "You made me feel like I mattered again." Rachel crossed the room and hugged him. He felt fragile in her arms, this old man who'd just given her everything. "You do matter. You matter so much to us." When they pulled apart, Jennifer was standing in the doorway, holding out a tissue box for both of them. "My father wants to move to California," she said, "to live in an assisted living facility near me. He'll get better care there, and I'll be able to visit every day." Rachel felt a pang in her chest. "When?" "In about 2 months," Mr. Chen said. "Which means you have 2 months to move in here. Take your time, do it at your own pace. And Rachel, I'll still visit. You can't get rid of me that easily." Over the next 2 weeks, Rachel went through all the paperwork with the lawyer. She signed documents she barely understood, kept waiting for someone to tell her this was all a mistake, that it was too good to be true. But it wasn't a mistake. The house was really hers. She gave notice at her apartment, though the landlord barely seemed to care. She'd just been another struggling tenant to him. She started packing slowly, carefully, still hardly able to believe this was happening. The day she told Sophie and Tommy, she brought them to the house. She'd been keeping it a secret, wanting to see their faces when they saw it. "Are we visiting someone?" Sophie asked as they pulled up. "Not exactly," Rachel said, her heart pounding with excitement. "This is our new house." Tommy's eyes went wide. "We're going to live here?" "We're going to live here," Rachel confirmed, unlocking the door. The kids ran through the house, their voices echoing off the walls, their footsteps thundering on the floors. Sophie claimed the bigger bedroom. Tommy immediately loved the swing set. They were laughing, really laughing in a way Rachel hadn't heard in months. "Mommy, is this really ours?" Sophie asked, running back to hug her mother. "Do we really get to stay?" "We really get to stay," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. "Forever. This is home." Moving day came on a sunny Saturday. Mr. Chen insisted on being there despite his age, directing the few friends Rachel had recruited to help. Jennifer had flown back out to help as well. Mrs. Garcia from the old building came, bringing homemade tamales and crying happy tears. As Rachel carried in the last box, she stood in her new living room and looked around. Her furniture looked shabby in the bigger space, but she didn't care. They had rooms to grow into. They had a yard. They had stability. "Thank you," she said to Mr. Chen, who was sitting on her old couch catching his breath. "I still don't have words big enough." "Thank you," he replied, "for giving an old man purpose again, for showing your children that kindness matters, for being the daughter I needed when my own couldn't be there." He glanced at Jennifer, who smiled through tears. "No offense, sweetheart." "None taken," Jennifer said. "You were right, Dad. She's family." That night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were asleep in their new rooms, Rachel walked through her house. Her house. She still couldn't quite believe it. She thought about the version of herself from 6 months ago, exhausted and scared, carrying grocery bags up 3 flights of stairs. She'd just been trying to help. She'd just been trying to teach her kids to be kind. She'd had no idea that helping an elderly neighbor would lead to this, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the best things in life came from the moments when you helped someone without expecting anything back, when you were kind because it was the right thing to do, not because you'd get something out of it. Mr. Chen had told her that family takes care of family, but what she'd learned was something even deeper. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you choose, the one you build through small acts of kindness, through showing up, through caring. She'd given Mr. Chen companionship and care when he needed it most. He'd given her and her children security and hope when they needed it most. It wasn't about keeping score or paying debts. It was about recognizing that we're all connected, that we all need each other, that a simple act of carrying someone's groceries could ripple out into something that changed lives. 2 months later, Rachel stood in her driveway and hugged Mr. Chen goodbye. He was moving to California to be near Jennifer, to get the care he needed. Sophie and Tommy cried, clinging to the man who'd become their grandfather. "I'll visit," he promised, "and you can call me anytime. We're family, remember? Forever," Rachel said. As his car pulled away, Sophie slipped her hand into Rachel's. "Mommy, Mr. Chen said we should always help people, even when it's hard. Because you never know what might happen." Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand. "Mr. Chen is a very wise man." They walked back into their house, their home, the place that had come into their lives because Rachel had chosen kindness over convenience. Because she'd taken a few minutes to help an elderly neighbor when she had every reason not to. She didn't know it then, but Sophie would grow up remembering this lesson. Years later, she'd be the one helping others, passing on the kindness her mother had taught her. Tommy too would learn that helping others wasn't about what you got back. It was about being human, about caring, about making someone else's life a little bit lighter. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe noticed. Sometimes kindness was rewarded not because you asked for it, but precisely because you didn't. Sometimes the thank you you received was truly priceless, not because of its monetary value, but because it reminded you that good people still existed. That hope was real. That love could come from the most unexpected places. Rachel had helped an old man carry his groceries, and in return, he'd given her family something money couldn't buy. The knowledge that they were loved, that they mattered, that they were never truly alone in the world. 5 years had passed since that life-changing day when Rachel had signed the papers making the house hers. 5 years of stability, of growth, of building a life she'd once only dreamed about. Sophie was 12 now, thriving in middle school. Her room was covered with honor roll certificates and drawings she still loved to create. Tommy was 10, obsessed with soccer and building things with his hands. Both kids had flourished in ways Rachel knew wouldn't have been possible in that cramped apartment, in that uncertain life they'd left behind. Rachel had been promoted at the hospital. With the weight of rent and constant financial panic lifted, she'd been able to focus on her work, take additional training, and become a registered nurse. The pay was better, the hours more manageable. She could actually be present for her children's lives now. Soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, school plays. She didn't miss everything anymore. The house had become a home in every sense. Rachel had painted the walls, replaced the old kitchen counters bit by bit, and filled every room with warmth and laughter. The swing set in the backyard had been repaired and painted, and even though the kids were getting too big for it, neither wanted to take it down. It reminded them of where they'd come from, of the gift they'd been given. Mr. Chen called every Sunday. Without fail, at 3 o'clock the phone would ring, and the kids would fight over who got to talk to him first. He'd settled into his assisted living facility in California, and Jennifer visited him 3 times a week. He was happy, healthy for his age, and loved sharing stories about his life there. "I made a new friend," he'd tell them. "Her name is Dorothy. She plays a mean game of cards." Sophie would giggle. "Do you have a girlfriend, Mr. Chen?" "At my age, we just call them friends," he'd say. But Rachel could hear the smile in his voice. True to his word, Mr. Chen visited twice a year, once in summer, once during the holidays. Those visits were like Christmas morning for Sophie and Tommy. They'd prepare for weeks, making welcome signs and planning activities. Mr. Chen would stay in Rachel's room while she took the couch, despite his protests. During his visits, they'd cook together, share meals, and talk for hours. He'd tell the kids stories about their mother's kindness, about how she'd changed his life. Rachel would shake her head, embarrassed, but the kids loved hearing it. They were learning that their mother was special, that kindness mattered, that helping others was never a waste of time. Jennifer had become a friend, too. She visited occasionally when she came to town for work, and she and Rachel had developed a bond. 2 women who understood the weight of responsibility, the complexity of family, and the power of second chances. "You gave my father 6 more years of joy," Jennifer told Rachel during one visit. "The doctor said the loneliness was killing him faster than his age." "You saved him, Rachel. Really saved him." But Rachel always felt like it was the other way around. Mr. Chen had saved her children, given them a future that felt secure and full of possibility. One Sunday, during their regular call, Mr. Chen sounded different. Tired but peaceful. "Rachel, I need to tell you something," he said. "The doctors say my heart is getting weaker. Nothing dramatic, just old age catching up with me. I'm not worried. I've had a wonderful life, especially these last years." Rachel's throat tightened. "Don't talk like that." "I'm 87, he said gently. "It's not sad, Rachel. It's just life. But I want you to know something. You and Sophie and Tommy, you're in my will. Not for money, you don't need that from me, but for letters. I've been writing letters to each of you. Things I want you to know, things I want the kids to remember when they're older." "Mr. Chen," Rachel whispered, tears flowing. "Don't cry," he said. "Be happy. You taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about caring. You showed up for me when no one else did, and look what it became. Look at this beautiful family we built." After they hung up, Rachel sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she used to stress about bills, and she cried. But they weren't entirely sad tears. They were grateful tears. Tears for a friendship that had changed everything. Tears for the reminder that life could be hard and beautiful at the same time. Sophie found her there. "Mom, are you okay?" Rachel pulled her daughter close. "I'm more than okay, baby. I'm blessed." That night, Rachel tucked both kids into bed in their own rooms, in their own house, in their safe neighborhood. She kissed their foreheads and thought about the day she'd helped an old man with his groceries. One small choice, one moment of kindness. It had changed everything. As she turned off the lights and walked through her home, Rachel understood something profound. We never know which small act of kindness will ripple out into something bigger. We never know whose life we might touch or how they might touch ours in return. All we can do is choose kindness. Choose to help. Choose to show up. And trust that somehow, in ways we can't predict, love finds its way back. Mr. Chen had taught her that. And now every day she was teaching her children the same lesson. The gift kept giving, spreading outward, touching more lives. And that, Rachel thought, was the real thank you. Not the house, though she was grateful for it. The real gift was knowing that kindness mattered. That one person could make a difference. That family was something you built with love, not just something you were born into. Years from now, Sophie and Tommy would help others. They'd remember the old man who became their grandfather. They'd remember their mother's kindness. And they'd pass it on. That was the legacy. That was what lasted. That was priceless.